Okay, time for the last C-sharp video. And it's on the 2D and 3D tic-tac-toe, which I find very fun, very interesting, and I like doing the reuse. As you can see, I got quite a lot of reuse stuff, so I'm going to talk about how I got it to be reused, how it could be better, because I do it in a certain way, which I think works wonderfully for this scenario, and by that I mean, like, I'll explain it more in a second, but you're not really going to expand something that is intended to be used for something that's 2D or 3D. You're not really going to use it for a 4D. Uh, in my opinion, fourth dimension is time anyway, so that doesn't really make any sense. But I, so that's kind of what I mean. So it still is it still is reusable, but it's not as expandable, I suppose I would say. So I'll get into that in a second. Here's the game class for the 2D. So this actually could even be, there's even more reusable stuff that could be in here. And I'll show what I mean when I look at the game class and the 3D and you're looking and you're seeing, oh, it looks the exact same. That's because it is. So you can see it could probably be cleaned up a little more with everything. So like these methods, everything in here, exact same, except for this one line. So the grid, you can pick the dimensions. So that's kind of what I mean. You can only select between 2D and 3D, but that could be changed slightly. I'll explain that in a second, but yeah. Because of that, other than that one line, these game classes are the exact same. I just didn't end up changing it just because I wasn't completely sure on how it interacts with like the Microsoft framework game. But but I think you can easily see how this could be reusable, where you could just load the models in with like a method, uh, all of basically you would keep the overrides, and then everything in these would just be like a method since they're reused. But I just decided for this, for these, it's mostly the same since I already had so much reused stuff. So yeah, this is also pretty much the same as its initial state before I took stuff out, except for, yeah, the stuff's just not in there. So grid. This is a little there's kind of a lot, kind of not a lot at the same time. So just going from the top, there is size. So that's the size of the grid. Dimension, so that's what dimension the grid is in. Then there's the grid val, which is the X's and O's, the selection spot, the cursor, the list of models, and get who won. So the size and dimension is really the only different thing. So when you construct it, the default is 2, so that's why the 2D didn't have a number. That's just because it's the default. And then obviously you set everything, and then here's what I mean. So you do a little, what's the word? It's failing me. Inline if statement. So if the dimension is 3, then it's 27. Otherwise, it's 9. You could, so that's kind of what I mean. That's a little bit hard coded. You could just do some math instead. It was just easier to do this way, and it's still reused. But if for some, because I guess you could potentially want a one dimension tic-tac-toe, which is just a line. That doesn't seem very fun, but and it also seems, I guess, yeah, impossible to win, assuming you do it's 1 by 3 instead of 3 by 3. But anyway, so you initialize the grid based on the size, obviously. Then you just fill it up. Index, so this maps the 3D values to a 2D space, so that's just a little bit of math. So obviously you have your x, y, and then z, which is default 0, because you might not have that third dimension. So you add the x to the y, you multiply, and then this you multiply too. So you either get so x, y, 3 by 3 by 3, or just 3 by 3, or it's math. It's too early in the morning for math. Um, move cursor. So that is the same, except for there's that if statement for dimension. Toggle selection, that is the same. That's, I think, except for there's just, it uses that index. Actually, no, it's not the same at all. What am I saying? So it uses that index to actually get it into 2D space. Uh, yeah, and you just toggle selection with that. And then here, so this is the get who won. It's different because it uses a helper method, which is get winning lines. So basically, it's a little complicated, but it's not. It just gets all the combinations in all of the dimensions. So the first loop uh, works for 3D, but not the other way around. So that's why uh, this is an if statement. So it basically it gets these regardless, because you can see you can this just you just oh, it just depends on how many time the dimension depends on how many, or how many times depends on the dimension. So it's either 1 or 3 that you want to do this. So this is always done, and then you need to do, so you can see here kind of what it is with the index, where you can see 0, 1, 2, so that's like in a straight line. And then here is kind of the diagonals for 2D, and then these is just the 3D stuff, so that's why it's doubled, because these are already used. So instead of being tripled, it's doubled because these are used for 3D as well. And then, so these are just your vertical and horizontal, and then these are your diagonal. So it's basically doing every combination, and then this, it just loops through them and actually checks them all. So this could have been in here, but this is kind of a lot. You got to check every combination. So having it as a helper method made a lot more sense. And then you draw the grid. So obviously you draw the first dimension, you draw the second dimension, and then you maybe draw the third dimension, or you do, like you do it it's a number of times thing. Again, you can see here 2, 1, or 3 times. Depending on the dimension. So then you have, it's a little complicated, but you have like the indexing, so you get the XYZ to get your 2D form of the 3D grid, or just your 2D grid. You get your location. So other than that, which is still, like this is, other than that, this is kind of the same as it was before. Other than that, and other than your obviously third dimension on occasion. But yeah. And then here, just return dimension. I ended up needing that, so this is kind of cheating for the object oriented, but it just makes sense. Grid val has to be separate, so, or it doesn't have to be, but it's used in both, so it makes sense to be separate to save on code. And then, before I get into other stuff, there's a couple things I want to mention. You can see I'm in the 2D here. I was having some issues. So 2D, for all intents and purposes, works as the 3D, or as the common. So other than game and program, which you can see is duplicated between them, 3D uses all the stuff from 2D. And then I was gonna mention the pattern. So this is also kind of cheating because it's already in there, but flyway pattern. So you can see there will be anywhere from 9 to 27 models on here, but there is only 3, or there's only 4. So these are used between them. These are shared. That's what the flyway model is. And then the other, I guess I have my 4 technically. I don't have to do this, but I like doing it. The solid principles. So as you can see, these aren't very abstract, is what I was gonna say. In this case, there definitely is room for abstraction, but that's not really something that I focused on. It's more of a single responsibility thing. A grid, it has initialize grid, move cursor, which is just moving a spot on the grid, so that still makes sense. Toggle selection, same thing. I guess get who one could potentially not be a single responsibility thing, but it is still like grid. You, depending on how you see it, you could argue that is something that the grid would do. I think it makes sense for even with single responsibility, but that could definitely be argued. Obviously, grid val is just small enough that it's single responsibility. Game, I'd say it's single responsibility too, just because it just uses the game class and it overrides it. So, uh, same with input handler. This is probably the most single responsibility of stuff that I personally made, just because it just handles input. There's literally one method in here. It's a bit of a beefy method, but not really much you can do about that with having different inputs and stuff. And then my model, like I'm saying, single responsibility for like my solid thing, but it's not linear. It could be more single responsibility. It could be less. It's not like it is or it isn't, is what I'm trying to say. But if this is input is the most, this might be the least. It's still, I'd still say that it, like for the most part, it is pretty good. Draw makes sense. Create texture, maybe. Move, yeah, that makes sense. Set random velocity, and maybe that could be something separate. Set color, that makes sense. This makes sense. So yeah, I'd say it's everything is pretty good on single responsibility. It's just, I mean, it's code. It could always be better. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent, but it still was related. But now it is input handler, so this is almost the same as last time. Almost. So it has the mouse stuff from the 3D in here, so the 2D can now have the camera movement, and the other thing is just I added the forward and backward with W and S, which you only do in 3D. But other than that, it is the same. Oh, and there's the last time was not backward, last time was not forward. But yeah, that's pretty simple. Then my model didn't change anything there, and the program just runs it. So yeah. And then, like I said, program is just program, just runs it, and then game, the only thing that's different is the 3. Literally one character. Actually, ignoring the namespace and the imports, uh, I'm kind of impressed with myself that I managed just one character makes them the same, or yeah. And yeah, this is all pretty good. Like I said, it is a bit linear in the aspect that I'm kind of like reflecting before I run it, but it is kind of linear in the aspect that right now it only works with 2 dimensions, but you could refactor it to change. It'd just be okay. It would be technically a little less efficient because you'd have to write more code because this doesn't work. Uh, you'd have to maybe have like a separate mapper enum because see you only want to do once for the second dimension but 3 times for the third dimension, so you'd have like a mapping for each one, or you could maybe the math works it on that where you could just do like a multiplication. But yeah, there's the ability there. It's just future proofing it technically makes it a little less efficient now, and since you're likely only to do the second and the third dimension, it doesn't make sense to have the potential to work with the fourth dimension is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, here's the 2D. So here's what I meant. This uses the camera now. I'm trying to remember. I think it was like the one. Yeah, it was the 1, 2, 3 buttons that work for that. And then So let me put that in there, and then C, so you can move stuff. Let's win, and then press winner. I know you mentioned about the text, but I wasn't bothering with that. I was just trying to get this focusing on the other stuff. And then, so yeah, that's the 2D, and then all I gotta do is just go to 3D, and like I said, this uses the stuff from the 2D. And then see camera movement. It's obviously a little harder to see the center and stuff. So I think this side is the front. So, and you start at the back. So, WW, yeah. So now we're here. And I'll try and do like a diagonal through the middle. So if I go up, left, S, that should be the center one. And then I go up, left, S. Yeah, so that it gives you can do the diagonal in there. So that works. I just had to make sure, or it's hard to see in the center. And I'm going to rerun this. And I'll just go up to the top to make it easier. So up, up. Yeah, so now we're at the top of it. So you can move around. Oh, now I'm right because it's a 2D plane. It's like it sees it in slices, so the controls are a little hard to wrap your head around because there's no like indication for direction. But maybe that's something that could be added in the future. And then, yeah, I don't know what else I'm trying to say. I'm not like this video needs to be extended any longer or anything like that. So yeah, that's it. See you next time.